this bucolic hippie commune, so to speak, was a highly classified military establishment that was in full operation.
When was that built?
It was built World War II years, I believe, initially as a anti-aircraft installation to protect Los Angeles against a possible aerial attack during World War II, and then it morphed into a film studio at some point and was said to be the world's most complete self-contained film studio.
So, okay, if it's a film studio for the Air Force, what were they developing? What were they shooting? What was the point?
Well, the main purpose, according to various sources, was to process the raw film stock from the early atomic bomb tests, the nuclear weapons tests. But that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because, like I say, this was a fully operational film studio that capable of doing everything in-house. They had, every animation department, editing facilities, film vaults, sound stages, everything to make a film from soup to nuts. And, to process raw film stock, all you really need is a darkroom. Could have been anywhere. There was no need to fly that film all the way, to this remote outpost in Laurel Canyon that was a fully functioning film studio. So obviously there was a lot more going on there than what has been acknowledged. Whether we'll ever know the full scope of what was being done at this facility is, an open question.
Well, one of the strange things in the book that you mention is that people like John Wayne, Marilyn Monroe, these guys had ID passes. What were they doing there? Were they narrating things? Why would they need to be a part of this?
Yeah, some real heavyweights from Hollywood. Performers like Marilyn Monroe, John Wayne, as you mentioned. I think Jimmy Stewart, and very heavyweight filmmakers like I think John Ford and a couple others. Were involved. They had security clearance to work in this facility, and yet no one seems to know exactly what they did there, and they remained remarkably closed-lipped about it. Pretty much all of them, as far as I know, went to their deaths without ever even mentioning the existence of this facility, let alone that they had any association with it. So it was a very well-kept secret for a very long time.
I've lived here for 20 years. 20 plus years. I had never heard of this, and now that I've seen it in your book, I think it's finally getting some play. I believe Jared Leto just bought the house for cool $5 million.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was just in the paper not long ago, which is a bargain price actually. Considering
I think so too.
This is a huge facility that it had heliports and all kinds of stuff at one time, and. I know it transitioned into residential housing for a while, and then it was bought by some entity that I believe operated it for a while as like a celebrity rehab center.
You're right.
And but most recently, it was just in the LA Times just within the last few weeks that Jared Leto has now purchased it as presumably as a private residence or maybe as an investment property. I don't know what he plans on doing with it.
So we've got this strange covert military installation looming over Los Angeles. In Santa Monica, we have the Rand Corporation, another spooky entity. This all looms over LA and the burgeoning entertainment scene, which takes us to the real point of the story, which is the rock and roll that came out of Laurel Canyon. And certainly the most famous or enigmatic figure to emerge from that scene would have to be Jim Morrison, the Lizard King, the lead singer of The Doors. But he also had a very conspicuous father. Tell us a little bit about Jim and his father and their place in that strange saga.
Yeah, Jim was certainly a larger-than-life figure, to this day, very, very iconic figure. The curious thing about him is that his father was actually a very high-ranking Navy admiral, which that part was known prior to my work on this book. But what I discovered, which had not been previously reported, is that not just was he a Navy admiral, but he just happened to be the Navy admiral who oversaw the Gulf of Tonkin incident. He was the commanding officer of the ships involved in that notorious incident, which of course led immediately to the passage of the Tonkin Gulf Resolution and then to the full-scale involvement of ground troops in Vietnam, and ultimately the deaths of some 60,000 Americans and countless millions of Vietnamese and Laotian and Cambodian people, all of which was a direct result of this so-called Tonkin Gulf incident, which, Jim Morrison's father was a key figure, to say the least, in orchestrating that whole incident that quickly resulted in the U.S. being, engulfed in a very, very bloody quagmire over there. And that happened just like within a year or so of the sun emerging on the Laurel Canyon Sunset Strip scene as this larger-than-life icon of the anti-war, peace movement crowd. So there was a very curious juxtaposition there, to say the least, that you have the father sailing off to, help choreograph this incident that drug America into this bloody quagmire, and then the son almost simultaneously emerging on the scene as this larger-than-life icon of the anti-war crowd. And never mentioning, of course, who his father was throughout his years of fame. He conspicuously avoided ever mentioning who his father was and what a key role he had played in.
And we can only guess as to why that was, but there's a picture in the book that shows Jim, the young Jim, the collegiate Jim, very clean-cut, preppy almost, with his father on the bridge of the what's the name of the ship?
Bonhomme Richard, I believe it was?
Bonhomme Richard, which was the ship in the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Correct, yeah.
So it gets even weirder because you discuss the fact that Jim, and I've had other people who are big Doors fans kind of confirm this to me independently, Jim was not really a likely candidate to be a rock star, and he wasn't even a musician.
He had no musical background at all. By his own account, he had never had much interest in music, even as a fan. He said he'd only been to like one or two concerts, in his life. He didn't really listen to a lot of music. He'd never viewed himself as a singer, never learned to read or write music, never learned to play an instrument. Even after he achieved fame with the Doors, he never learned to read or write music or play an instrument. By his own account, he he'd had no musical training and had never viewed himself as a, musician or singer-songwriter. And as you say, not long before he emerged as this figure that we see here, was a very much different Jim Morrison, very clean-cut, collegiate, almost unrecognizable. Seeing his father off as he was about to leave, I think sailed out of San Diego for the Gulf of Tonkin, and within a year he had completely transformed himself physically and emerged as this rock star, just out of nowhere. I mean, just an amazing physical transformation and an amazing transformation from someone who had expressed no interest in music whatsoever to, just like overnight becoming this huge international star.
He was, the Doors, the whole scene that they emerged from, largely considered to be the leaders of an anti-war movement. Obviously, we know what happened with the Doors as they continued, but what blew me away, Dave, Jim died the same day his father gave a speech on the decommissioning of the ship that he was the rear admiral on during the Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very strange.
That's really weird.
Very strange timing, yeah, to say the least.